I am Pam Edwards, and the last time I was with you was the first Sunday in March. As you probably have figured out, we have two adult Sunday school classes. The Martha S. Persons one is for this month, May, and then the other adult class will pick up June, and then we just rotate around. Almost a month ago, April the 3rd, this church lost a very, very dedicated member. And I would like to speak for our Sunday school class, as Jim O'Brien was a powerful strength as a teacher of the Martha S. Persons class. Jim and his wife Shirley joined our church in 1964. He soon began teaching the men's Bible class that met in the sanctuary. Heaven forbid that we would have the women and the men together. I remember that era. And Nancy, I believe your father was the minister at that time. In 1968, Jim and Shirley moved to Churchland. Those of you who are not familiar with Tidewater, Virginia, you're not going too terribly far when you go to Churchland. And as soon as he landed, it didn't take long, he had a job teaching Sunday school. In July of '76, Shirley and Jim moved back to Windsor and returned to our church. Again, he was teaching Sunday school very quickly. This time, it was the young adult class. Then he moved to our class, the Martha S. Persons, covering the first and fourth Sundays of each month. He also found time to be on the deacon board 2 terms. He also did 10 years as a superintendent of the Sunday school and a member of the Christian Education Committee. And lastly, he was a board member of the Eastern Virginia Association of the Southern Conference. And somehow, with all of these church commitments, he had a job that he handled very well. In 2018, after 42 years of teaching Sunday school in this church, he so wisely asked Shirley, his wife, to take over his one Sunday that he was trying to do. I must tell you this little side story about Sunday school and this church. My husband and I joined this church in 1994. In the late 90s, I was asked to assume one Sunday a month for our Sunday school class. So when I was asked, that was great. I had previously taught Sunday school. I just said, that'll be good, I'll do it. The first Sunday I taught here, I thought everything went well. And then I showed up the next month for my Sunday, and it occurred to me as I was sitting there that I really should get to know these other teachers. So I started coming each Sunday, and soon, very soon, it was a Jim O'Brien Sunday. And I was quickly made aware of how proficient a teacher he was. And maybe I should needed to get myself in gear. For example, Jim gave us on that Sunday, that first Sunday I heard him teach, he gave us a piece of paper to take home. It just happened to have the history of Jesus' genealogy. I still have that piece of paper. No one had ever put that in front of me before. Plus, this was something, being a fellow teacher, this was something that I really noticed. He never had to pause to think about what he was covering in the lesson. He was unbelievably prepared. Thanks to Shirley for helping me to understand his lifelong contributions towards Sunday school. We will miss Jim and all he did for this church, and especially for the different Sunday school classes. Today's lesson is from the 22nd chapter of 1 Kings. This book will contrast the lives of those who lived for God and those who refused to do so. The once great nation of Israel during the Old Testament era was divided geographically and spiritually. There was a northern kingdom of Israel, and if you were the king there, you were called the king of Israel. And there was a southern kingdom of Judah, and if you were the king there, you were the king of Judah. Jehoshaphat. The way I can remember this is Jehoshaphat begins with a J and Judas begins with a J. He was their king for 25 years in the middle 800s BC. Prior to being their king, Jehoshaphat had served as a recorder during the reign of David and Solomon. This tells us that, number one, he was literate. And that's an important thing because in that era, the population just generally was not. But the most important thing I see is that, excuse me, that he, in being a part of David and Solomon's time frame and being with them, he had an opportunity to observe how you are the top layer of running a country. Now, Jehoshaphat had a philosophy about how to live his life. You can leave here today and decide whether you will have a philosophy, but he had one. He said, "Seek the Lord on all things." He was very religious. He also has a list of credits to his reign. He established a system of public instruction. Jehoshaphat sent priests and Levites on pre-planned circuits to teach religion and skills to the public as they needed. Now, what kind of religion did he want conveyed to his people in his country? The first thing he told them he wanted them to do was that idolatry and true worship could not coexist. Think about that. He was very much against idol worship. He established courts of justice throughout his kingdom, and Jehoshaphat maintained a vast army. Don't hold that against him, because in that era that they're talking about in the 800s BCs, and even other eras that the Bible talks about, if you were a ruler of a country, you'd better have a decent army, or else you may lose your little position. He did not seek riches. Some of it came to him, but he did not take advantage of his population in order to be the rich king. He had one, I call it a problematic decision that he made, and it kind of haunted him. Jehoshaphat allowed his son to marry Jezebel's daughter. Now, I don't think I need to give a definition of Jezebel. Now, the other kingdom was the one that I said, if you were the king, you were the king of Israel, and that's your northern kingdom. And the ruler at the same time that Jehoshaphat was at Judah, the ruler in the northern kingdom was Ahab. Ahab married Jezebel. She was a non-Jew. She worshiped Baal. In fact, she told him, she said, we need an altar so that we can worship Baal. Ahab's worship of Baal resulted in 3 years of famine because of his disobedience to God. And if I mention the name Elijah, you're not going to have any problem knowing that he was one of the good prophets. And God sent him to meet with Ahab. And Elijah said, you've got to get rid of these false prophets. You've got to get rid of this idol worship and all that. And Ahab was not happy with Elijah. And instead, he asked Jezebel what she thought about what Elijah said. And you can just about imagine. She said, only listen to the prophets that tell you what you want to hear. That puts a little twist on it. Ahab was an able warrior, many victories. I read in one research on it that at that time he had 2,000 chariots. I just can't imagine how you handle that kind of thing. He built an ivory palace. We don't need an ordinary one. We would need an ivory one. And as one of the researchers, the theological researchers said, Ahab lacked analytical thinking. He couldn't think both the pros and the cons of what he truly needed in life. Now that sounds like, well, you got to get serious about your thinking. Well, he needed to get serious. Now, because of his decisions and because of his lifestyle as a king, he was labeled the most evil king of Israel. So you've got two distinct rulers. You've got Ahab that's not doing well at all in our opinion, and then you have Jehoshaphat, who seems to be handling his ideas about religion, his ideas about how to handle his span of people that he has rule over. I read this in another section, and it really threw me. At one time, he and Jezebel had maintained 850 prophets of Baal. And evidently, I took that to mean that they took care of them, saw that they were fed, they had clothes and everything. And at the same time, he had the prophets of Jehovah slain. He only wanted what he liked and what he wanted to hear about. In the 16th chapter of 1 Kings, 33rd verse, Ahab did the most to provoke the Lord God of Israel to be of anger than all the kings of Israel. Now, this is where history becomes interesting. If you're looking at a map and you see the Sea of Galilee and you move down about an inch and then you look to your right, which is going to be your east on that particular map, and there you are. You're at a city that is called Ramoth Gilead. Now this is important. Before Ahab and Jehoshaphat were kings, Syria, I thought this was so interesting, just think about today and all that. Syria took possession and kept that city for 70 years. The city of Ramoth Gilead. So, now Jehoshaphat and Ahab, they are now kings. They wanted possession of this city. This battle to take possession of Ramoth Gilead took place in the mid-1850s. I'll tell you up front, Ahab is not going to be able to make it through this battle alive. And we know that he died in 854 BC, so there you are. That's when the battle was. However, the most interesting part of the story was the decision-making process that they went through to get to the point where they said, yes, we're going to go take that city back. From the 22nd book of 1 Kings, the first 5 verses, now 3 years passed without war between Syria and Israel. Jehoshaphat went north to visit King Ahab of Israel. And he says to Ahab, will you go with me to fight at the city of Ramoth Gilead? We need to take it over. But there's a big also to all of this. Jehoshaphat says to King Ahab, please inquire for the word of the Lord today. See, now we said Jehoshaphat's philosophy of life was that he consulted God whenever he had a decision to make. Well, that just kind of flew over Ahab's head. And the next part I will paraphrase. Ahab, if you remember, liked to have prophets. He just wanted to make sure they told him what he wanted to hear. So he arranged to have 400 false prophets of Baal to meet with him. And he asked them the basic question, should I go into battle to reclaim this city? And the answer, this is what gets you. All 400 had the one answer. I've been on committees when 4 people couldn't get the same answer together. The answer was, Ahab, go up, for the Lord will deliver it into the hands of the king. Now, what did it refer to? Did it refer to the city or the victory? Probably, and that's what he wanted. He interpreted it and what he wanted. But Jehoshaphat, upon hearing how Ahab obtained his answers from the prophets, it just went against Jehoshaphat, because he understood clearly what the difference was between a heathen prophet and a prophet of the Lord. And he knew what kind that Ahab liked to have around him. And Jehoshaphat asked Ahab, is there not still a prophet of the Lord here, that we may acquire of him what his ideas are? King Ahab says, oh, bring Micaiah. He's with the Lord. All right. Now remember, we've got three people going. We got Ahab, Jehoshaphat, and now we have Micaiah. And he even instructed a specific person to find Micaiah and to bring him to the where they were. And the person who was bringing Micaiah closer and closer, where they were walking evidently toward the palace, he said, let your words be like one of them. We don't want Ahab to be upset. We want words of encouragement. Now, Micaiah answered that person. He said, whatever the Lord says to me, that I will speak. But, you know, when you speak to one person and then you speak to another, you can get entirely different reactions. Ahab had not figured out that it was unusual that four people could come up with one answer to a question that he asked. And also, Ahab minimized God being a part of the answer he received. If Jehoshaphat hadn't been pushing for it, they probably would have never had someone who represented God to be in the decision making. Micaiah was questioned over and over, are you telling me the truth? And finally he answered with a question. Now that's typical of biblical literature. You ask a question, you answer it with a question. It was good enough for Socrates. He made a whole lifestyle of it. And so Micaiah says in his answer question style, who will persuade Ahab to go, meaning to the city, that he may fall at battle in that city? Yes, he did die there. But another interesting point that somehow retained itself when they put the literature together is that Ahab wore clothes which were unfit for a king in battle. But kings always dressed a certain way when they were in battle. Jehoshaphat had on his battle attire. But Ahab thought, if I dress like an ordinary person, they'll never kill me. Well, that didn't work. It did not work as Ahab planned, and needless to say, he died. But let's think on this. This is what's really important. And this goes along with my favorite saying, the words Sunday school is really, in a way, a misnomer, because Sunday school is for every day of the week. Let's think on this. The use of false prophets in society back then lasted approximately 1,000 years. I may not have that span quite right. There were false prophets, and they were extremely evil ones, and there were prophets who represented God, and some of them had the courage to profess the coming of Jesus. Has our culture continued a connection to false prophets? Are we led astray because the words pleased us? Hey, if you hear what you like, you're going to listen. Even today, we have people who profess many ideas that lack credence, they lack respect, And most of all, they lack the value of the connection to God and His grace. So, we need to also look at the fact that many times we tend to connect to those who profess our beliefs. It's a lot easier to listen to someone who is right down the line of the way you're thinking. It is calming to be in agreement. Oh, these meetings just go so well because nobody objects to what is being put in front of them. Nobody questions it even. And it's calmness. But are we stepping forward as Jehoshaphat did when he insisted to consult God? We need to think ahead. Do we, as a modern human beings, believe that false concepts appear and somehow they reappear throughout our lives? Yes, they do reappear. We could be a teenager learning how to make decisions. Hey, some of those problems are going to surface again. We could be a young adult making the top of the line salaries. Oh, yes, we are doing it. But we have to deal with false prophets in the situation. And when you're in your middle ages, you are thinking, I've got quite a few more years left, hopefully. We find ourselves at that time looking back, saying such things as, I should have done such and such several years ago. Now, you're looking backward and you're looking forward in life, having an opportunity to make even more critical decisions. Can we connect successfully with asking God for help for these decisions? Of course we can. God cares about our problems and our decisions. All aspects of life need our connection to God. Yes, we can connect. There's always the opportunity to make that connection. It is one of the best things we can do in life is to maintain that connection, even if you think it's just a little bit of a decision that you have to make. And when the next time you sit in these meetings where absolutely no one even asks questions, they just agree to whatever is being put out there in front of them, just think, and make sure that you connect. Let's have a prayer as we close our lesson. Father, we thank you so much for this wonderful day, this beautiful weather, and the fact that we can be together and we can know that God is always there and that we can have that connection to you. We can be in the know and not doing things that we didn't understand, and know when to walk away from situations that are not good. Be with us, care for others that are in desperate need, and may your grace sustain us each day with the decisions that we make. In Jesus Christ's name. Y'all have a wonderful week.